I stared at my bank account, the numbers glaring back at me like an accusation. $20,000. Gone. Just like that. My name is Rebecca Wilson, 32 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life climbing the corporate ladder. As a financial analyst, I know the value of money better than most. I know how many overtime hours and sacrificed weekends went into saving that 20 grand. It was supposed to be my down payment fund, my ticket to finally owning a piece of the American dream. Instead, it went to saving my parents' house from foreclosure. I wasn't naive when I wrote that check. At least I didn't think I was. Despite years of emotional distance between us, I couldn't stand by and watch Thomas and Margaret Wilson lose everything. When Mom called crying about the foreclosure notice, something in me broke. I thought maybe, just maybe, this gesture would heal the wounds that had been festering in our family for decades. I thought wrong. What I never expected, what I still can't wrap my head around, is that after they deposited my check and saved their house, they would completely cut me off, block my number, return my letters unopened, tell extended family not to mention my name. It's like I ceased to exist the moment the funds cleared. $20,000. That was the price of discovering what I meant to them. Not a daughter, not a person they loved, just a financial resource they could drain and discard. I keep replaying our last conversation in my head, searching for clues I missed, wondering when exactly I became expendable to the people who gave me life. This is the story of how I tried to patch things up with my parents by paying their debts, only to have them cash my check and then permanently cut me out of their lives. Growing up in a modest colonial-style house in Lexington, a middle-class suburb outside Boston, I lived a life that appeared normal on the surface. Our neighborhood was filled with well-maintained homes, manicured lawns, and families who hosted backyard barbecues in the summer. But behind our forest green front door, financial anxiety was a constant presence. My father, Thomas Wilson, ran his own small construction company, Wilson Building Solutions. Business was feast or famine. One month we'd celebrate a big contract with dinner at Bertucci's. The next we'd eat macaroni and cheese for a week straight because payments hadn't come through. Mom, Margaret, worked part-time as a dental receptionist, but she had expensive tastes. She'd watch our neighbors upgrade their cars or renovate their kitchens. Then suddenly our perfectly functional Honda needed replacing, or our countertops were embarrassingly outdated. Credit cards bridged the gap between their income and their spending, a fact I discovered at 12 when I accidentally opened a bill and saw the 5-figure balance. I was the responsible one from an early age. While other kids got allowances, I started babysitting at 13, shelving books at the local library by 14, and working weekend shifts at the mall by 15. At first, I was proud to contribute, buying my own clothes and school supplies. But then came the borrowing. $20 from my dresser drawer for gas, $50 from my birthday money, because Dad's client was late paying. My parents never seemed to view my money as actually mine. "We're family, Becca. Family helps family," Mom would say whenever I questioned where my savings had gone. The guilting was subtle but effective. When I wanted to buy concert tickets with friends, "Must be nice to have extra money for fun while we're stretching to pay the electric bill." When I got a raise at my part-time job, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. That extra $60 a week will really help with the car insurance." There were constant comparisons to my cousins, especially Michael, who gave his parents his entire paycheck from his summer job. "That's a son who understands family loyalty," Dad would comment pointedly across the dinner table. By the time I turned 17, I had opened a secret bank account at a different bank than my parents used. I'd deposit most of my earnings there, leaving just enough in my visible account to avoid suspicion. Even then, I understood that protecting myself financially wasn't being selfish. It was being smart. But that knowledge didn't stop the guilt from eating away at me. Didn't stop me from wondering if I was a bad daughter for wanting financial independence. It's a question that would haunt me for years to come, long after I'd left that forest green door behind. Senior year of high school marked my first real act of rebellion, though it shouldn't have been considered rebellion at all. After countless late nights studying, maintaining a 4.2 GPA while working 20 hours a week, I earned a substantial, merit scholarship to Boston University. My parents' reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of pure pride, there was an undercurrent of calculation. "This is perfect," Dad said, reviewing the financial aid package. "You can live at home and commute. Think of all the money we'll save on room and board." The "we" didn't escape my notice. Neither did the assumption that I'd continue living under their roof, under their financial thumb. When I announced my intention to live on campus, the battle began. "So ungrateful," Mom sniffed, "after everything we've sacrificed for your education." Dad was more direct. "This is financially irresponsible, Rebecca. Why waste money on a dorm when you have a perfectly good bedroom here?" I stood my ground, explaining how campus housing would allow me to fully immerse in college life, join study, groups, and build connections. The real reasons, freedom from their financial grip, space to breathe without guilt, remained unspoken. I moved into Warren Towers that August, my parents coldly helping unload my few belongings. "I hope this experience is worth putting this burden on the family," Mom said as they left. During those 4 university years, I worked harder than seemed humanly possible. While my roommate Zoe attended parties and joined clubs, I juggled 3 part-time jobs, mornings at the campus coffee shop, evenings at the library, and weekend shifts at a downtown restaurant. Between work and maintaining my 3.9 GPA to keep my scholarship, sleep became a luxury. My parents' expectations didn't diminish with distance. They called weekly, conversations inevitably turning to money. "Your father's truck needs repairs. Any chance you could help out this month?" Or, "We're a little short on the mortgage, just temporarily." I'd send what I could, usually accompanied by the hollow ache of knowing they saw me more as an income source than a daughter forging her own path. The contrast between my family situation and others became painfully clear whenever Zoe's parents visited. They'd bring care packages, take us both to dinner, and ask about classes without any financial agenda. They were investing in their daughter's future. My parents seemed to view my education as a potential return on their investment. The deepest cut came graduation day. For 4 years, I'd marked May 15th on every calendar, highlighted in yellow, the day all my sacrifices would culminate in that walk across the stage. 3 months before the ceremony, I reminded my parents about the date. 2 months before, I mailed them the formal invitation with RSVP card. 1 month before, I called to confirm they'd be there. The day before graduation, Dad called. "Something's come up, Becca. Johnson offered me a last-minute contract, started today. Can't turn down the work. Your mom doesn't want to drive in the way city alone, so she's staying home too." I sat alone in my cap and gown as names were called, watching other families cheer and take photos. Zoe's parents brought me flowers and took pictures of us together, their kindness making my parents' absence even more acute. That night, as my classmates celebrated with their families, I packed my apartment alone, tears silently falling as I boxed up 4 years of memories and broken expectations. Something shifted in me that day, a protective shell forming around my heart. If they couldn't be bothered to show up for one of the most important days of my life after having months to plan, then perhaps the distance I'd been creating wasn't just physical but necessary for my emotional survival. The job offer from Meridian Financial in Chicago arrived 3 weeks after graduation. Entry-level financial analyst, $48,000 a year plus benefits. Not exceptional, but a solid start with growth potential. The real appeal lay in the 700 miles it would put between me and Boston. When I told my parents over Sunday dinner at their house, Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "Chicago? That's practically another country, Rebecca." Dad's approach was more methodical. "Let's think about this logically. Cost of living is higher there. You'd be starting over with no connections. There must be comparable positions here in Boston. I'd anticipated this reaction and came prepared with spreadsheets showing salary, comparisons, cost of living adjustments, and 5-year career projections. What I couldn't quantify on paper was the value of distance, of building a life free from their financial expectations. The conversation devolved as I remained firm. "I never thought you'd be the type to abandon your family," Mom said, tears welling. Dad was more direct. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By moving halfway across the country?" I felt the familiar mixture of guilt and resentment rising in my chest. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm starting my career. This is what parents are supposed to want for their children." Mom's response cut deep. Parents want children who care about family, not just themselves. I moved to Chicago 2 weeks later, their cold goodbye still burning in my memory. My studio apartment in Wicker Park was tiny, but mine, the first space that truly belonged to me. While my peers at Meridian hit happy hours and weekend brunches, I worked 60-hour weeks, determined to prove my worth. The distance provided clarity. Without my parents' constant presence, I began recognizing patterns in our relationship that I'd normalized. The expectation that my financial resources were family resources, the emotional manipulation when I established boundaries, the way love seemed conditional on compliance. Still, obligation ran deep. 3 months after moving, I set up a monthly transfer, $500 sent directly to their account. Not enough to strain my budget significantly, but enough to ease the guilt. Their response was always the same. Immediate gratitude followed by subtle hints that it wasn't quite enough. "This helps with the electric bill, sweetie, though the property taxes are due next month." After 2 years at Meridian, I received my first significant promotion, senior analyst with a $15,000 raise. That weekend, I called my parents with the news. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, her voice brightening. "So you'll be able to increase your monthly help, right? Your father's business has been struggling." The request was so immediate, so expected, that something in me snapped. "Actually, I'm putting the extra money toward my future. I'm starting a house fund and increasing my retirement contributions." The silence on the line was deafening. "I see," Mom finally said, her tone chilled. "I suppose your future is more important than your parents' present situation." That night, I wrote a careful email explaining that while I loved them, I needed to establish financial independence. I would send one final $1,000 payment, but after that, the regular transfers would stop. Their response was a single line. "We understand where we stand in your priorities now." The weekly calls grew shorter, colder. Conversations that had meandered through complaints about neighbors or Dad's business troubles became perfunctory exchanges of basic information. Without my financial contributions, it seemed, my value to them diminished. I threw myself even deeper into work, filling the void with professional accomplishments. By my 3rd year in Chicago, I'd earned another promotion and started dating Mark, a thoughtful architectural engineer who'd grown up with supportive, loving parents. A contrast that often left me wondering what I'd done to deserve so little from mine. Our relationship with my parents settled into a distant detente. Holiday calls, occasional emails. But the warmth of family had been replaced by the formality of obligation. I told myself this was normal, healthy even, that I was finally standing on my own. I couldn't have known that the fragile peace was merely the calm before a storm that would cost me far more than money. Monday morning, 3 years into my Chicago life, my phone lit up with my mother's name while I was reviewing quarterly projections. I let it go to voicemail. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months, and I had a presentation in 30 minutes. The notification pinged. 1 new voicemail, 67 seconds. I almost deleted it without listening, assuming it was another thinly veiled complaint about my absence or lack of financial support. Something made me press play. Mom's voice came through, not with the usual controlled guilt trip, but cracking, with genuine panic. Rebecca, please call us back as soon as you can. We're about to lose the house. The bank. They've started foreclosure proceedings. We have 3 weeks before they auction it off. Your father's business. That big client. North Shore Development went bankrupt, owing him $70,000. We've been trying to manage on credit cards, but we're maxed out everywhere. We have nowhere to go if we lose the house. Please, Becca. I know things haven't been good between us, but we need your help. I sat frozen, coffee growing cold beside. Me, the carefully constructed wall between my parents and my finances beginning to crack. I postponed my presentation and called Dr. Patterson, the therapist I'd been seeing since moving to Chicago. This is exactly the pattern we've discussed. Rebecca, she cautioned during our emergency phone session, their financial emergency becomes your emotional emergency. Before you make any decisions, consider whether you're enabling destructive behaviors. Her words made logical sense, but logic wasn't driving the knot in my stomach. This wasn't about a borrowed $20 or guilt-tripped birthday money. This was my childhood home, the place that, despite everything, still appeared in my dreams. That evening, after pacing my apartment for hours, I called them back. The phone rang 5 times before Dad answered, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Becca? Thanks for calling back. No accusations, no passive-aggressive comments about how long it took me to respond. Just genuine relief. Mom joined on the extension, and what followed was unlike any conversation we'd had in years. They laid out their situation with unvarnished honesty. Dad's business had been struggling for years, but he'd taken on the North Shore project as a make-or-break opportunity. When they filed for bankruptcy mid-project, it left him with unpaid invoices and materials he'd already purchased on credit. They'd been borrowing from one credit card to pay another, a financial death spiral I recognized from my professional training. They were underwater on the mortgage by nearly $50,000 after taking out home equity loans to keep the business afloat. We've tried everything, Mom said, her voice small and unfamiliar. Your father even applied at Home Depot, but at 62 they only offered part-time minimum wage. Then came something I never expected. An apology. We know we haven't been fair to you, Becca, Dad said, clearing his throat. We put too much pressure on you, expected you to solve our problems. That wasn't right. You were just a kid, and even as an adult, our financial issues aren't your responsibility. Mom added, we were so focused on our struggles that we couldn't see how we were hurting you. Missing your graduation? I've regretted that every day since. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, tears flowing on both ends of the line. They admitted to resenting my independence because it highlighted their own financial failures. They expressed genuine pride in my career success, without the usual undercurrent of what's in it for us. By the time we hung up, something had shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen by my parents. Not as a financial resource, but as a daughter they'd hurt and wanted to reconnect with. The next day, they emailed detailed financial documents showing exactly what they owed. $20,000 would stop the foreclosure and pay off the highest interest credit cards. It was the exact amount of my house down payment fund. As I stared at those numbers, I knew I was at a crossroads. This could be the beginning of healing our relationship or the continuation of a destructive pattern. Despite Dr. Patterson's warnings, echoing in my mind, despite the hard-earned wisdom of years maintaining financial boundaries, I felt myself leaning toward helping them. Perhaps this time really would be different. The decision weighed on me like a physical presence. $20,000, my entire house down payment fund, representing 4 years of aggressive saving, overtime, and forsaken vacations. I scheduled an emergency therapy session with Dr. Patterson, who maintained her professional demeanor despite clear concern. Rebecca, I can't tell you what to do, but I want you to consider your patterns. What evidence do you have that this time will be different? I didn't have a good answer, just a feeling, a hope born from the vulnerability in their voices. That weekend, I invited my best friend Zoe and my boyfriend Mark to my apartment for advice. Zoe, who had witnessed the emotional aftermath of my parents' absence at graduation, was skeptical. "They've shown you who they are for years, Beck. People don't change overnight because of one heartfelt conversation." Mark, whose relationship with his own parents was built on mutual respect, took a more measured approach. "If you do this, you need clear boundaries. This can't be a blank check with no expectations." Their caution was warranted, but neither understood the complicated tangle of love, obligation, and hope that connected me to my parents. After 3 days of deliberation, I made my decision. Sunday evening, I called my parents with terms. I would provide the $20,000 under 3 conditions. First, complete financial transparency. I needed to see all accounts, debts, and income sources to ensure the money would solve the immediate crisis. Second, they would commit to financial counseling through a program I found that specialized in helping older adults rebuild credit and manage retirement planning. Third, and most importantly, weekly family therapy sessions, either in person when I visited or via video call. "This isn't just about money," I explained carefully. "If we're going to rebuild our relationship, we need professional help understanding how we got here." Their agreement was immediate and enthusiastic. "Whatever it takes, Becca," Dad said, a new humility in his voice. "We want to make things right between us." Mom added, "We've missed you so much. We're ready to do the work." The next morning, I initiated the transfer, $20,000 from my house fund to their checking account. As I confirmed, the transaction, a complex mixture of anxiety and hope, swirled in my stomach. Had I just made a colossal mistake or taken the first step toward healing? The initial signs were encouraging. That same day, they sent me confirmation that the bank had received the mortgage payment and halted the foreclosure proceedings. Dad texted a photo of himself at the credit counseling office, picking up information packets. Mom called with the name of 3 family therapists covered by their insurance, asking which I preferred. Every day that week they checked in, not asking for more money, but sharing small updates about their progress. Mom sent pictures of the garden she was replanting, saying she wanted the house to look nice when I visited. Dad mentioned applying for a steady maintenance position at the local school district, less money than his contracting work, but reliable income with benefits. For the first time in years, our conversations felt genuine, focused on rebuilding connection rather than financial transactions. I began sleeping better, the constant knot of tension in my shoulders easing. Maybe people could change. Maybe relationships could heal. Maybe the money was an investment in a new beginning rather than a continuation of old patterns. I shared the positive developments with Dr. Patterson, who remained cautiously supportive. "I'm happy things seem to be improving, Rebecca. Just remember that real change is a marathon, not a sprint. Watch for consistent behaviors over time." I scheduled a long weekend visit to Boston for the following month, my first trip home in nearly 2 years. In preparation, I bought small housewarming gifts, a set of kitchen towels Mom had admired online, gardening gloves to replace Dad's worn pair. For the first time since childhood, I found myself looking forward to seeing my parents, imagining conversations that didn't revolve around money and guilt. The hope I felt was fragile, but growing stronger with each positive interaction. Perhaps $20,000 was a small price to pay for the family I'd always wanted but never had. The first missed therapy appointment came 3 weeks after I sent the money. "Car trouble," Dad explained apologetically over the phone. "The transmission's been acting up. We've rescheduled for next Tuesday." I accepted the explanation without question. Car problems happen, and they'd rescheduled promptly. The following Tuesday came and went. When I called that evening to ask how the session went, Mom answered with a congested voice. "We're both down with this awful flu that's going around, sweetie. The therapist said we shouldn't come in and spread germs. We'll try again next week when we're feeling better." A twinge of doubt flickered, but faded quickly. After all, It was flu season in New England. Their daily check-ins had decreased to every few days, then to twice a week. The conversations remained warm but briefer, often ending with vague references to errands they needed to run or visitors stopping by. I told myself this was normal, the initial intensity of reconnection naturally settling into a sustainable rhythm. Then came the Facebook post. I rarely checked social media, but Zoe texted, "One Thursday afternoon. Isn't that your parents at Mohegan Sun?" Attached was a screenshot from my cousin Michael's page, a group photo at the Connecticut Casino's restaurant, my parents smiling broadly in the center, wine glasses raised in celebration. The timestamp showed it was posted 2 days earlier, the same day they'd claimed to be too sick for therapy. My hands trembled as I examined the image. Mom wore a new blouse I didn't recognize, her hair freshly colored and styled. Dad sported a leather jacket I'd never seen before. They looked healthy, happy, and certainly not flu-ridden. I called immediately, my heart pounding. Mom answered on the 5th ring, her voice instantly shifting when she realized it was me. "Becca, how are you, sweetie? Your father and I were just talking about calling you tonight." I cut to the chase. "I saw Michael's Facebook post from the casino. You told me you were too sick for therapy, but you were well enough for gambling and dinner?" The silence stretched for several seconds before her response came, defensive and sharp. "Are you spying on us, Rebecca? Checking up like we're children? We were feeling better by then, and your Aunt Sandra insisted we join them for her birthday. It was just dinner, for goodness sake." My throat tightened. "The therapy was your idea, Mom. You both said it was important to you." Dad took the phone. "Now listen, Becca. We appreciate the help with the house, but that doesn't give you the right to monitor our every move. We're adults. We'll get to the therapy when things settle down." When things settle down. The phrase hit me like a physical blow, the same words they'd used throughout my childhood to defer promises. "We'll go to your recital when things settle down. We'll take that trip to New York when things settle down." Things never settled down. I ended the call feeling hollow, the hope of recent weeks curdling into familiar disappointment. That evening, I texted to suggest visiting that weekend to check on their financial counseling progress and perhaps attend a therapy session together. Mom's response came hours later. "Not a good time, honey. We're having some work done on the house and it's a mess. Let's plan for next month instead." I sat in my darkened apartment, Dr. Patterson's warnings echoing. The pattern was reasserting itself, but I desperately wanted to be wrong. Maybe they really were having work done. Maybe they really would attend therapy next month. Maybe this wasn't history repeating itself. But as days turned into weeks, the evidence mounted. Calls grew less frequent, their tone increasingly irritated. When I mentioned therapy or financial counseling, every suggestion of visiting was met with a new excuse. The initial warmth following the money transfer had cooled to a familiar chill. I tried one last time, sending a carefully worded email expressing my concern that our agreement wasn't being honored. Dad's reply was curt. "We're working on things at our own pace. We don't need you checking up on us constantly." 30 days after sending $20,000 to save their house, I found myself exactly where I'd been for years, on the outside of my parents' lives, valued only for what I could provide, not for who I was. The realization settled like ice in my veins. I had been right to hope, but wrong to believe that money could change patterns established over decades. As May turned to June, I prepared myself to accept another painful lesson about the people who had raised me. My Aunt Helen's text arrived on a Tuesday morning as I presented quarterly projections to senior management. "Just wanted to say how wonderful it is that you're helping your parents after all they did for you. Your mother told everyone at book club how you gave them $20,000 as a thank you gift for their years of sacrifice. We're all so proud of you for repaying their support." I excused myself from the meeting, locked myself in a bathroom stall, and read the message 3 times, each word a fresh cut. Thank you gift? Years of sacrifice? The narrative they'd constructed bore no resemblance to reality, to the financial and emotional manipulation, to our careful agreement about how the money would be used, to the promises of therapy and rebuilding. They weren't just avoiding our agreement. They were actively rewriting history to make themselves the generous parents, and me the grateful daughter. Something shifted inside me, grief hardening into resolve. That Friday, I booked a last-minute flight to Boston, rented a car at Logan Airport, and drove the familiar route to Lexington without calling ahead. The June afternoon was postcard perfect, rhododendrons blooming along neatly trimmed lawns. As I turned onto Oak Street, my childhood home came into view, and I felt my breath catch. The house looked better than it had in years. Fresh paint on the shutters, new landscaping in the front yard, and parked in the driveway. A gleaming silver Lexus sedan that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. I sat in my rental car for several minutes, gathering courage, before walking up the freshly pressure-washed walkway and ringing the bell. Footsteps approached, followed by my father's voice through the door. "Who is it?" "It's Rebecca," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. The door opened slowly, Dad's expression shifting from shock to barely concealed annoyance. "Becca? What are you doing here? You should have called first." "May I come in?" I asked, already stepping past him into the foyer. The interior stopped me short. Gone was the worn furniture and outdated decor. The living room featured a new leather sectional, a glass coffee table, and mounted on the wall, a massive flat screen. Television, at least 60 inches wide. Through the archway, I glimpsed a dining room set I didn't recognize, gleaming under a new chandelier. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her surprise quickly masked with forced brightness. "Rebecca! What an unexpected surprise! We were just having lunch." The kitchen behind her had been renovated, new granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and custom cabinetry that certainly hadn't been installed during any work on the house that would have justified postponing my visit. I remained standing as they awkwardly offered drinks, snacks, excuses about the mess in a house that looked professionally cleaned. When we finally sat at their new glass dining table, I asked the question burning in my throat. "How's the financial counseling going?" They exchanged glances before Mom answered. "We've been meaning to get to that. Things have been so busy with your father applying for new positions and all the repairs the house needed." "Repairs," I repeated flatly, gesturing toward the new television. "And was a brand new Lexus also necessary to stop the foreclosure?" Dad's face darkened. "Now listen here, Rebecca. We don't answer to you about how we spend our money. The immediate crisis is over, thanks to your help. But that doesn't mean we can't make improvements to our quality of life." "What about therapy?" I pressed. "That wasn't optional. That was part of our agreement." Mom's laugh was brittle. "Therapy is for people with real problems, not normal family disagreements. We're fine now. Everything's resolved." "Nothing's resolved," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You promised financial counseling. You promised therapy. You promised transparency. Instead, you've bought new furniture, renovated your kitchen, purchased a luxury car, and told the entire family I gave you the money as a gift to repay your sacrifices." Their defensiveness erupted simultaneously. Dad stood towering over the table. "You've always been too controlling, Rebecca. Just like when you moved away for college, then to Chicago. Always thinking you know better than everyone else." Mom's approach was more insidious. "We raised you, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you speak to us? After everything we've done? The money was the least you could do considering how much we've given up for you over the years." The conversation spiraled from there, years of resentment pouring out from both sides. When I mentioned that the money had been my house down payment fund, Mom dismissed it with a wave. "You're young, you make good money. You can save it again. You don't need a house at your age anyway. Dad's words cut deepest. You only helped us so you could feel superior, so you could control us with your conditions and your therapy demands. We don't need your judgment or your money with strings attached. After an hour of circular arguments, I stood to leave, emotionally exhausted. At the door, I made one final attempt. I didn't help you to control you. I helped you because I thought we could repair our relationship. I thought things could be different. Dad's response was chilling in its finality. Things are different. We don't need to worry about losing the house anymore. The rest was just talk to make you feel better about yourself. I walked back to my rental car, tears blurring my vision, $20,000 poorer but immeasurably richer in painful clarity. The parents I'd been seeking, the ones who would love me unconditionally, who would work to understand our broken patterns, didn't exist. Perhaps they never had. The drive back to Logan Airport passed in a blur, my mind replaying the confrontation, searching for something I could have said or done differently. By Sunday night, back in my Chicago apartment, emotional exhaustion gave way to determination. Despite everything, I wasn't ready to give up completely. After consulting with Dr. Patterson, I composed a lengthy email to my parents. I acknowledged my anger and disappointment, but expressed willingness to move forward if they would commit to the original agreement about therapy. I understand financial counseling might feel unnecessary now, I wrote, but the family therapy is non-negotiable if we're going to have any relationship going forward. I spent hours crafting each sentence, balancing honesty with compassion, setting boundaries without accusations. I hit send, then waited. 1 day passed. 2, 3. By the end of the week, the silence was deafening. I called their landline, getting the answering machine. I tried their cell phones, going straight to voicemail. I texted simple, non-confrontational messages asking them to please respond to my email. Nothing. The following Monday, I called from my office phone thinking, they might be screening my number, Dad answered, and I felt a moment of relief before he recognized my voice. Rebecca, your mother and I need some space. Don't call again for a while. The line went dead before I could respond. That evening, I discovered they'd blocked my number on both their phones. My texts showed as undelivered, calls went immediately to a generic voicemail. The digital severing felt like a physical pain, a phantom limb I kept trying to use despite its absence. My 33rd birthday arrived 2 weeks later. I'd sent them an invitation to visit Chicago, enclosed with a card expressing my ongoing desire to work things out. The envelope returned to my mailbox marked "Return to Sender" in my father's blocky handwriting. I reached out to my cousin Michael, asking if my parents had mentioned our disagreement. His response was uncomfortable. They said not to discuss. You with them, Becca. I don't want to get in the middle of whatever's going on. One by one, I contacted extended family members, each conversation more disheartening than the last. My grandmother, usually my ally, was evasive. They seem happy lately, Rebecca. Whatever happened between you, can't you just apologize? Family is too important for pride. The narrative had solidified. I was the ungrateful daughter who had turned against her loving parents. Without access to their version of events, I had no way to counter it. As summer faded to fall, my attempts at contact grew less frequent but more desperate. I sent a handwritten letter by certified mail, requiring signature confirmation. The tracking showed it was refused. I emailed articles about family estrangement and reconciliation. No response. I sent Christmas cards, birthday cards, thinking, surely some occasion would crack the wall of silence. Each returned unopened. The definitive end came 3 months after my confrontational visit. A letter arrived in a business envelope, my name and address typed rather than handwritten. Inside was a single sheet of paper, formal and cold as a legal document. Dear Rebecca, after careful consideration, We have decided that it would be healthier for all concerned if we no longer maintain contact. While we appreciate your financial assistance earlier this year, the conditions and judgments attached to it have made clear that our relationship cannot continue in a productive manner. Please respect our wishes and refrain from further attempts at communication. Any future correspondence will be returned unopened. Thomas and Margaret Wilson. Not Mom and Dad. Not even a handwritten signature. Just their typed full names, as if I were a business associate being dismissed. Enclosed were the birthday and Christmas cards I'd sent, unopened. They hadn't just cut me off. They'd erased me. $20,000 had bought me clarity I never wanted, that in my parents' eyes, I was worth exactly as much as what I could give them, nothing more. The depression that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I functioned at work on autopilot, my performance slipping enough for my supervisor to express concern. I withdrew from friends, avoiding questions about family or holidays. Nights were the worst. Lying awake, replaying my childhood, searching for the moment when I became disposable to them, wondering if I'd ever truly been loved at all. I questioned every memory, every interaction, my own worth as a daughter and as a person. If the people who created me could discard me so completely, what did that say about who I was? Dr. Patterson increased our sessions to twice weekly, gently, guiding me through the grief of losing parents who were still alive but had chosen to make me dead to them. You're mourning both the relationship you had and the one you wanted but never received, she explained. Both losses are real and valid. The rational part of me understood this was their issue, not mine, that their behavior reflected their own damaged patterns. But the wounded child within couldn't stop asking, what if I had been different? What if I had given the money without conditions? What if I had never moved away? What if? The endless loop of self-doubt that kept me frozen between anger and desperate longing for the family I'd never have again. 6 months into therapy specifically focused on my family estrangement, Dr. Patterson suggested I join a support group for adult children of emotionally unavailable parents. Isolation reinforces the belief that there's something uniquely wrong. With you, she explained, hearing others' experiences might help you contextualize your own. I was skeptical, but desperate. The following Tuesday evening, I sat in an uncomfortable folding chair in a community center meeting room, surrounded by 12 strangers who understood my pain without explanation. Lisa, whose mother had disowned her for marrying outside their faith. James, whose father communicated exclusively through criticism. Sophia, whose parents used financial support as a control mechanism, much like mine. As each person shared their story, I felt the tight band around my chest loosening slightly. I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I wasn't unlovable. I was simply the adult child of parents who lacked the emotional tools to love healthily. We met weekly, these strangers who became my anchors. Unlike well-meaning friends who suggested reconciliation, they're still your parents, or life's too short for grudges. The group understood the complex grief of having parents who were alive, but functionally dead to you. They celebrated small victories. The first holiday I got through without calling my parents. The day I packed away childhood photos that caused me pain. The morning I woke up and didn't immediately think about them. 9 months after my parents' final letter, my Aunt Helen called with news. My parents were asking for money again, this time claiming serious medical issues. Dad had been diagnosed with early-stage prostate cancer, treatable but requiring surgery their insurance wouldn't fully cover. They needed $15,000 and had asked family members to relay the request since I'd rudely cut off communication. The familiar guilt and obligation surged immediately. Cancer. My father had cancer. Shouldn't that transcend our conflict? Dr. Patterson helped me recognize the manipulation at work. They're using intermediaries to circumvent the boundaries you've established. If your father truly has cancer, that's unfortunate. but it doesn't erase their treatment of you. After careful consideration, I sent an envelope to my aunt containing information on hospital financial assistance programs, local cancer support organizations, and Medicare supplemental coverage options, but no check. Please pass these resources. To my parents, I wrote. I wish them well with medical treatment but am unable to provide financial support. It was the first time I'd maintained a boundary without crippling guilt afterward. My healing continued in unexpected ways. I volunteered as a financial literacy coach at a women's shelter, using my professional skills to help others avoid the traps of financial dependence I'd witnessed and experienced. I started dating again after breaking up with Mark, whose well-meaning but simplistic view of family had become another source of pressure. I focused on rebuilding my house fund, watching with quiet satisfaction as the numbers grew back toward 20,000, then beyond. 2 years after the estrangement, I found a small but charming condo in Lincoln Park, with enough space for a home office and a spare bedroom. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment tinged with sadness. This milestone should have been shared with family. Instead, I invited my chosen family, Zoe and her husband, my support group friends, colleagues who'd become confidants during my darkest days. They helped me move furniture, hung curtains, stocked my kitchen with essentials, and threw an impromptu housewarming party complete with dollar store champagne glasses and grocery store cake. As we toasted my new home, I looked around at these people who expected nothing from me except authenticity and mutual support. 3 years passed without contact from my parents. Through extended family, I occasionally heard updates. Dad's cancer treatment had been successful. They'd taken a cruise to Alaska. Mom had minor surgery for carpal tunnel. Each piece of news carried less emotional charge than the last. I no longer checked my mailbox hoping for a letter of reconciliation or dreaded seeing their number on my caller ID. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from an acute, stabbing wound to a dull ache I could live with. One Thursday afternoon, a familiar name appeared in my email inbox: Michael, my cousin. Thought you should know your parents are selling the house and moving to Florida next month. If there's anything sentimental you want from inside, I could try to get it for you. I stared at the screen, absorbing the finality this represented. The house I'd saved with my $20,000 would now fund their retirement in a different state. After careful consideration, I declined Michael's offer. The physical items, my childhood books, school trophies, photo albums, weren't worth reopening wounds that had finally begun to heal. Tell them I wish them well in their new chapter, I wrote back, surprised to find I genuinely meant it. That evening, I sat on my small balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, reflecting on the journey of the past 4 years. The $20,000 hadn't bought me the parents I wanted, or the relationship I'd hoped for. Instead, it had purchased an expensive but invaluable lesson: that true family isn't defined by biology, but by consistent support, mutual respect, and unconditional love. I'd lost the family I was born into, but had built something perhaps more precious: a chosen family of friends who loved me for exactly who I was, not what I could provide. The relationship with my parents had indeed sunk, but I had learned to swim, then build my own boat. Today, my financial practices are meticulously healthy: emergency fund fully stocked, retirement accounts growing, investments diversified. But my true wealth lies in the boundaries I've established, the self-worth I've reclaimed, and the genuine connections I've cultivated. I still sometimes dream about reconciliation, about my parents suddenly developing the emotional capacity they've always lacked. I've accepted that this fantasy says more about my healing heart than their potential for change. The most profound realization has been this: sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is to release those who see us only as resources rather than full human beings worthy of love. In letting go of toxic relationships, even familial ones, we create space for genuine connections to flourish. The journey through pain has given me strength I never knew I possessed, and wisdom I couldn't have gained any other way. Have you ever had to let go of someone who only valued what you could give them rather than who you are? It's one of life's most painful lessons, but also one of its most liberating. If my story resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my journey. From financial analyst to emotional wisdom, from bankrupt relationships to the richest kind of self-knowledge. I hope it brings some comfort or clarity to anyone traveling a similar path.